to episode 1 of the Addiction Nutritionist Podcast. I am joined today by my friend and co-host, Nikki Aiello. I'm so excited that you're here, whether you're listening on the podcast or you're accessing this through video on YouTube. We are going to have a wonderful and brief episode today, just really introducing you to what this podcast is going to be about. Why did we start the Addiction Nutritionist Podcast? What is the backstory? Nikki and I are going to share a little bit about who we are and why we're here in our own personal journeys. But really the point of today's episode is to just give you a brief introduction to what is coming ahead. What are the things that we're going to be talking about on the Addiction Nutritionist Podcast? And what is the reason for that? What is the heart behind it? And how we think it's going to impact those of you that are listening and watching today. So I'm just going to start out by introducing myself. If you do not know me or you've never met me before, my name's Kelly Miller. I'm a nutrition therapist, I'm a health and wellness coach, and I'm also a recovery coach. I will give Nikki Aiello, my co-host, an opportunity to give you a little bit of her background information and why she's here as well. But I want to let people know what a nutrition therapist is, because a lot of people haven't heard of that before, especially if you haven't worked with me before. It's a little bit different from a dietitian. It's actually a lot different from a dietitian, but we really do focus on using food to help people heal. Because of my own personal journey and my own passion that I've developed in life, I have only specialized in helping people in recovery. And when I say recovery, I mean recovery from substance abuse, recovery from process addictions, but also recovery from food addiction and disordered eating. This business really grew out of a desire to help people in recovery from substance abuse, but it has sort of changed over time and allowed us to have the platform to help more people who also struggle with food. Because as I've done this over the last 5 years, I've seen that that is a huge component to the recovery process. And somebody who may or may not have ever had a problem with a substance, is often going through an extremely similar experience with food, specifically sugar and ultra processed foods. And so it was really just an organic and natural progression to sort of put our arms around those people and welcome them into our community as well. So a recovery coach is somebody that sort of helps somebody in recovery achieve what their goals are in recovery. It's not about me and what I want for your life. It's about what do you want to establish in recovery and what kind of life do you want to lead? And then as a coach, we sort of help you bridge the gap and put the action steps in place to get that vision and then to put one foot in front of the other to accomplish that vision. And that's very similar to a health and wellness coach. So if somebody has really specific health goals, we use that same sort of process. So I want to share a little bit about what this podcast is going to provide. It was really born out of a desire to increase access to the information that I provide through one-on-one sessions with individuals, as well as group sessions that I've been doing for the last 5 years in treatment facilities like rehabs, partial hospitalization programs, detox centers. I've been facilitating small groups in these places, both in person and virtually, for about 5 years. And I've gotten tremendous experience from that. I've loved every minute of it. I have a deep passion to help educate people on the connection between how powerful food is in our recovery, but also how powerful it can be just for our health and well-being, and especially our mood and how we show up in the world every day. And so it can be expensive to provide one-on-one sessions to people or sell these large packages that are 6 months, 12 months, because it really can take that long to help people reach their goals and build a really solid foundation in recovery. And so this is the way that I felt like we could give this information away for free. So much valuable information we're going to cover in this podcast. This episode, Nikki and I are actually re-recording. So we listened to the first episode and felt like it didn't quite hit the nail of where we wanted it to be. So we already have 13 episodes of this podcast that we've pre-recorded and we feel amazing about. So we already know some of the things that we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about what are the dietary patterns for people in early recovery? What sort of obstacles and things come up for them, and the practical steps that you can use to overcome that? What are the crucial nutrients that people should be consuming through food primarily in recovery? Because they play a key role in the way that the brain functions, in reducing our cravings, in improving our mood, and reducing PAWS symptoms, which we'll talk about PAWS in a minute and what that stands for and what it is. Is there a diet out there that's right for people in recovery? The answer to that is yes and no. There are a lot of quote unquote diets out there that people can try, and people have had success, with a lot of these diets. But there also is a framework that everybody can apply, regardless of what type of eating that they prefer or what type of diet that they prefer for themselves. And if they follow this framework and sort of lay it over the top of whatever their preferences are for eating, you can really, truly make dramatic differences in the way that you feel, and even potentially health complications that you're having in a very short period of time. It's pretty remarkable. And this was my personal experience and why I'm so passionate about doing this work. So we're going to cover things like digestion, crucial nutrients. We're going to have client spotlights, where we have clients that I've worked with over the years come onto the podcast and talk about their personal experience and their personal successes. We're going to have experts in areas of weight loss, food addiction, digestion, cannabis recovery, alcohol recovery, relationship recovery. We have so much planned for this podcast, but the important piece is that it is all uniquely tailored to the needs of people in recovery. This is for you if you're in recovery. This is not just some random health and wellness podcast out there that's going to talk about all the things in the wellness world that half of those things may not apply to you. I do believe you're going to find that this is going to be highly relevant and tailored to your personal experiences, the challenges that you have, and you're going to find super practical information to help you overcome those challenges. So I mentioned PAWS, and I'm going to touch on what that is very briefly, because we are going to talk about it over and over and over again in this podcast. PAWS stands for Post-Acute Withdrawal Syndrome. It is not a medical diagnosis. It's just a fancy medical term to describe what somebody in recovery experiences in that first 1 to 2 years of recovery. So it's going to include things like depression, anxiety, insomnia, lethargy, brain fog, memory loss, low libido, all of these symptoms that are directly traced back to imbalances in our neurotransmitters, which is another topic we're going to talk a ton about. We're going to talk about amino acids, amino acid therapy, the connection between those nutrients, and our mood regulating hormones that we refer to as neurotransmitters. So if I'm saying all these big words right now and you're like, what is she talking about? Don't fret. We are going to parcel all of this out in upcoming episodes. And it is all highly relevant to experience a recovery where you can truly thrive and feel resilient in your recovery. A recovery that will have such amazing foundations that will last you for a lifetime. This is not just some quick fixes, some biohacks. This is laying down the groundwork for healthy practices and skill development that will literally serve you for the rest of your life. So I cannot wait to share all of this with you. But bringing it back to today, Nikki and I are just going to share a little bit of our personal stories with you. We're kind of just going to give you the headline so that you can get a little taste of who we are and how we ended up here on this podcast today and what that journey's been like for us. And you will learn so much more about us in upcoming episodes when we give little bits and pieces of our story. But today's just to give you a little bit of a taste of what's to come and introduce you to who we are. So Nikki, if you don't mind, I'm going to go first and share a little bit about myself, and then I'll hand it off to you. And then we will wrap up by talking about Recovery U, which is launching as we speak, which is going to be an amazing, wonderfully priced online community that you can sign up for today to be able to start putting the things that we're talking about in the podcast in action, as well as accessing my PAWS protocol course and all of the other wonderful information that we talk about at the Addiction Nutritionist. So my story is really one of lifelong traumatic tension. The far majority of my life, I lived in this space of carrying around a tremendous weight and a tremendous amount of tension. The tension really lied in, ever since I was young, feeling like there was this person I wanted to be and this person I was supposed to be. And then there was the person that I was. There seemed to be a huge gap in between who I was and who I had this inner sense that I was supposed to be, or who I sort of had a vision for. And I could never figure out how to find the bridge to get there. And this really played out in so many different ways, but primarily with how I took care of my body and my mental health. It all started when I was about 7 years old, and I had an older brother who actually had addiction issues of his own, and went to a rehab facility, but by the luck of the draw, ended up with leukemia and had an extended illness with leukemia and passed away at the age of 15. And during that time, this was back in the 80s, I was trying to navigate all of the emotions and the grief that came with that experience. And unfortunately, it did cause a lot of trauma because I didn't have the tools to be able to process those emotions at the time. And so what I did was I turned to food. And I have very vivid memories of standing in front of the refrigerator and battling with myself, battling with my cravings, and battling with my thoughts about what I was supposed to eat, how many times I should be coming back to the kitchen to get more food. And I really developed an unhealthy relationship with food. It became my coping mechanism. And that lasted well into my 30s. I'm in my 40s now. It lasted well into my 30s. And I would not even be able to articulate any of that to you until I was probably at least 30, 35, somewhere between 30 and 35, of going back and trying to figure out, how did I get here? And so that's where it started for me. And then entered the teenage years, started smoking cigarettes and nicotine as a way to stimulate my brain because I have ADHD, and that gave me the zing and the buzz that I needed to sort of feel alive and wake up. And again, I couldn't have articulated why I did that until much later in life. At the time, I just knew, gosh, this is how I want to feel, and that led to a 20-year battle with nicotine addiction. I really was what I would call a chain smoker for many, many years. And then late teens, early 20s, I moved from drinking alcohol in a recreational way to drinking alcohol as a way to process my emotions the same way that I did with food. I developed what I call a psychological dependency on alcohol. I was never physically addicted to alcohol. I could give it up for long periods of time if I wanted to. But it took me a long time to realize that I had developed this psychological and emotional dependency on it. And so, to make a long story short, here I am in terms of those substances. I really got a handle on my food and my disordered eating in my early 30s. I was able to quit smoking, and I believe I'm 8 years, something like 8 years nicotine free now, and I'm almost 5 years alcohol free. And all of these things are what led me to develop this business. The entry point for me was when I was in my early 30s and I was diagnosed with 3 autoimmune disorders back to back, and it completely destroyed my life. I was dying from depression, anxiety, insomnia, full body pain. I had a tremendous time just getting a diagnosis and figuring out what was wrong with me, but I knew something was seriously wrong with me. And I went from doctor to doctor to doctor and couldn't find help anywhere. And so I did what every other American seems to do when we feel like we've exhausted all of our resources in the conventional medical world. I turned to the internet and I just started Googling who has these diagnoses? What have people tried before? What's maybe not so conventional? And every single road seemed to lead back to nutrition. And I knew at that moment that if I was going to get better, I had 2 small children at the time. If I was going to get better, I had to do this thing. I had to tackle my food issues. And I was terrified. It was terrifying to think I had to give up certain things or change my relationship with food because it had become such like a best friend to me. It had always been there every day of my life, but it also was like an evil best friend because it controlled my life and it was awful. And so after my diagnosis with different autoimmune disorders, and I started to implement the dietary changes of really, really nourishing my body, not going on a diet, but relearning my relationship with food and how I interact with food and how it makes me feel and what foods make me feel a certain way, and replenishing vitamins and minerals and nutrients that my body was desperate for. And what I found through that process is really what led me to go back to school, to develop the business, what's led me to be sitting here with you today, Nikki, which is that the side benefit of changing my diet created a mood stabilization that I had never experienced before in my life. It was the most powerful sensation I had ever had. My whole life, I had been full of anxiety. I had been very moody. I had struggled with anger, a lot of self-pity and sort of victim mentality, and sort of this idea that this is just who I am and I don't know how to be different. Although I had massive inner turmoil of the way that I acted all the time, because it wasn't in alignment with, again, who I thought I was supposed to be, or who I had this felt sense that I was supposed to be. It didn't align with that vision. And so my defense to that was just that I'm just moody. I don't know. Maybe it's my DNA. And that side benefit of changing my diet, that created an evenness that I had never experienced before. I wasn't flying off the handle at certain things. I was sleeping better. Everything about my life changed. And then the next level, the next side benefit of that was, because my mood was so stable and my cravings had become so unbelievably under control, it allowed me to quit smoking. So I actually fixed all my food issues before I quit smoking, because that was such a powerful addiction for me. I never actually believed I could ever give it up. I desperately wanted to, but I was completely unsure I would ever be able to live without nicotine. And the mood stabilization that I had, the reduction in cravings, really laid the groundwork for me to be able to quit cold turkey. I made the decision to quit. I literally never looked back. I lived by the mantra, never one puff, never a single puff. I knew that I could never, ever go back and have one puff of a cigarette, because that substance was so powerful to me that I would immediately fall back into the habits of smoking 1, 2, 3 packs a day. Depending on the season of my life, I did vary from 1, 2 to 3 packs a day. It was pretty awful. And so all of those things eventually led to me giving up alcohol and experiencing a whole nother level of recovery. And so I had grown up always wanting to work in the addiction space in some way, because I had been exposed to it at a very young age with what my brother went through. And I did peer counseling in high school. And I remember feeling like, this is where it's at for me. I had a number of relationships, a number of friends, a number of family members that had struggled with what felt like a lot more serious addictions than I did. And I always felt like I was a source of mentoring for them, or a person who could lend an understanding ear. Although I struggled with addiction myself, it always felt like it was a little bit different, and that maybe I was actually born to do that work, but I never actually knew how to pursue it or how it would manifest in my life. I, maybe a year or two ago, was talking to a friend from high school, and we were laughing about old stories, and I opened up my high school yearbook and I looked at my senior picture, and I hadn't done this in like forever. And next to your senior picture, you're allowed to write, there's a guideline of, what do you want to be in the future? It has these questions and you answer the questions. And the question that said, what do you want to be in the future? I answered with healthy, which I cried. I cried when I saw that. I had completely forgotten that I wrote that as a senior in high school, because it completely flooded back to me all of the issues that I had with my weight at the time, my thyroid, my mental health, the addiction, the way that I showed up in the world every day. I had this deep, deep, deep desire to be a quote unquote healthy person, but I had literally no idea how to do that. I didn't actually know anybody that was really healthy. I didn't know anything about healthy food. I didn't know anything about exercise. I had never done sports. I really don't even think I had the internet at the time. So unless I was going to go look up, a Britannica encyclopedia about what does it look like to be healthy, I really didn't have any resources for that. And so it's just fascinating to me to sometimes to look back on that, because I had this deep desire to work in the addiction space, this deep desire to be healthy, and all of those things intersected with me in my early 30s when I met those two things together and had no idea they were even connected. And that's where the lights turned on. And I realized this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I'm going to figure out how to distill down everything that I did and what took me so long to help people find health and healing from addiction together in the same space. And although there are other people out there doing this work, and there are people who have come before me that I've learned a tremendous amount from, I actually really think there's a huge gap out there for this information. Because I've had trouble finding it myself. I've had people contact me from all over the world who have just sort of Googled keywords together and somehow landed on my website. And that's not me knowing how to find those people. Those people just typed in these keywords and were somehow led to my website and my work. And so this podcast, again, is my dream for filling that space for people in a completely free way to access this information. And we'll close it out after hearing from Nikki about talking about how you can sign up for Recovery U if you want to dive into the community aspect of this and get live one-on-one coaching at a very reasonable price so that we can do this work together and in community and help people really move from what I call reactive to resilient. And that's my story in a nutshell. My whole life, tons of tension. I finally feel at 43 that I've come into the body of who I was meant to be. I just had a birthday, and I know a lot of folks that sort of dread those things, and especially being in your 40s, that has not been my experience at all. It's as if the planets have aligned, and I've truly, like I said, come into that version that I always dreamed I could be. I feel like I'm fully living it. And it's an incredible feeling that I want other people to experience.
Kelly,
Sorry.
such an inspiring story. And of course you would get emotional because you've arrived. I'm getting emotional just, like hearing it and seeing it and being a part of it. And feeling so lucky to be connected to you at this time.
And I am so unbelievably grateful for you. And I'm going to let you tell your story, and I think more of this will come out in other episodes, but the support and the inspiration that I've gotten from you to be able to bring things like this to fruition and to have kind of that sister on the side who's walking that same lifestyle has been incredible. So thank you to you as well.
I feel the same way. So grateful. You're such a strong pillar of strength for me and inspiration. Oh, you help me stay on the path that I want to stay on. Mm-hmm. And so my background, well, first of all, my name is Nikki Aiello, and Kelly and I both live here in Colorado. I'm also a health and wellness coach and recovery coach. I've kind of created my own definition of recovery, although for sure addiction is a huge part of it, but also we are all recovering from so many different things. Like I've actually created the definition, recovery is restoring balance after having lost it. And there's so many things that can knock us over, right? Like we just, down for the count, we're seeing stars, we're trying to get up. It could be a divorce. It could be a breakup. It could be a job loss. It could be for sure addiction and changing your lifestyle. It could be also great things like retirement, just a move to a different place. Like it's reestablishing all of those support systems that we need, that sometimes we need an outside person to help us see that we're missing. Well, what are you doing socially? How is your sleep? Like, what are you doing for fun? All of these things that sometimes we lose sight of because we get caught up in like the drama of it or the pain of it or whatever, so that's kind of how I relate to recovery. My personal story for sure, though, is one of dependence. Absolutely. And biochemical mayhem. And it all started I'm sure it started before this for sure, but I'll just say it started at 13 with my love affair of alcohol when I first really, started to use it. And that just propelled me into a decade of a solid decade of biochemical roller coaster. Not only a puberty coming in there too with hormones and shifts, but then you've got alcohol, which is so disruptive to all the systems. Plus, like you mentioned earlier, in hindsight, you see things, you put the pieces together later of what was really happening. Like I was also gluten intolerant and lactose intolerant, and I lived on cheese and bread products. So I was slowly but surely destroying my digestive tract, which it has a huge connection to your brain. Plus I'm just, putting so many chemicals, alcohol was the gateway to everything else, anything that came my way. I was obviously always trying to create some sense of balance or feeling good, but going about it in a really destructive way, ultimately. So that was rough, years growing up. And eventually by the time I turned, in my early 20s, opportunity to move to the desert or just to move in general came up. And so that's really honestly when I can say like a force took over, because, like developmentally, I wasn't developing normally either. When you have alcohol coming in at that crucial age, you're just not developing emotionally, psychologically, all the things are askew. It's a wreck. And I'm a super creative person. I've got lots of gifts and talents, and that's a lot of stuff to be intertwined and not having direction or a safe container. I was just kind of a mess, even though, put on a happy face. I was very good at faking it, for sure. And a lot of people did not know the depression, that the depression started to show up around 17, 16 even, and I didn't recognize it. I started to recognize it around 18, but it wasn't until later on that I was like, wow, I have major mental illness, this is not right. But I didn't have the support system. I didn't have the understanding. I didn't have anybody to help show me a mirror, give me a helping hand, guide me in a certain direction. So thank goodness, honestly, I just feel like a force came over and gave me direction. We could talk, a whole different episode about what that force could be. But it did lead me to move to the desert and start what I call my own outpatient treatment program, which I had some family members out there to kind of help me out a little bit, and actually a lot. And so I was led to, first of all, nutrition. I knew nutrition was big. I didn't know a ton. I just knew it was big, and I knew sugar was the enemy. Those are two things I knew for sure without doing much research. I knew I wanted to find unconventional doctor. So that's where I discovered functional medicine. A lot of great healers in the desert in Phoenix. So that was great. That's where I found yoga, really dove into yoga. I had dabbled before, but I went full force into studying and practice at that time. Exercise, sleep, all of the healing arts, so much, I brought it all. I just explored so much. And I would say that some of the critical points there was when I somehow must have been I don't know how I landed upon it, but Potatoes Not Prozac was a book that introduced me to neurotransmitters and the food relationship to them, and also the relationship of alcohol and children of alcoholics and all sorts of genetic components and all of that kind of stuff. And that's when a serious light went off or on. And so I started to work with adjusting nutrition at that point. But honestly, truly, it was it was a long journey to really get myself dialed in. But that was huge. And it was, coming from all systems fail to starting to have some healing is tremendous in itself. So that's what, started everything, working really closely with my doctors, really learning about the mechanics of biochemistry and, psychotherapy and how it's just all connected, and I didn't have a coach. I didn't have, I just was bringing all these people in myself and trying to make my own little team here, which was huge. And, just to keep it simple, I really, my recovery journey was like a 20-year journey, really, all in all. To get me here to where I am today, which is feeling, like you said, clear, dialed in, the best I've ever felt in my life. Just I'll get teary if I go any deeper into that. So all that is to say, I learned so much in that process, and so much in looking back and reflecting on that process and putting the pieces together. And I'd like you, I feel like there's huge missing parts in the world of recovery. I also became a yoga teacher throughout that time, and then later on pursued my coaching training. And I was bringing yoga into treatment centers too, and really discovering, like, they were not teaching anybody how to eat correctly. And it drove me nuts. I had such issues with almost every single place that I would teach a workshop or a class. And it's been a huge passion of mine since then. So, I remember really wanting to connect with an addiction nutritionist, for years. And then was like, just miraculously, honestly, literally the universe just popped you into my phone one day. Like, it showed up on a screen when I was on something else. It was incredible. And I just made note, addiction nutritionist. And that's how we met. Somehow I reached out and we connected from there. And so my personal mission and passion is helping people do in, a much shorter period of time what took me 2 decades. And I know it's possible because I know where people can get off track. Mm-hmm. And I know where people can have blind spots to certain essential pillars, and just the relationship and the continued support of a coach is so huge. So that's what's led me to this work, to meeting you, to wanting to help and support people in this way, offering education, offering emotional support, resources, all the things. They're so empowering. So I'm just grateful to be here. Thank you, Kelly, for letting me be part of this.
Oh my gosh, I couldn't do this without you. I am so excited that we're on this journey together. And you brought up such amazing points, and it makes me want to make one thing clear too, because sometimes people will ask me, like, is this what I do instead? Like, is this a 12-step program, or should I do this instead of therapy? And we welcome all paths of recovery. Like with my clients in Recovery we truly believe that recovery is for everyone. And there are many different paths. You only have to listen to a couple recovery stories to know that people have found recovery through all different avenues. And this is never, when I say this, I mean the nutrition aspect, healthy, holistic living. I don't think it's a replacement for other things. I think it's a beautiful adjunct to all the other things you could be doing. So whether you're in a 12-step or some other kind of program, or you've been in therapy for years, or you're just now trying to figure out how to put your recovery pieces together, I do believe that nutrition therapy and learning how to take care of your body and understanding your personal relationship with food is a critical piece of that puzzle. It's not the one path. It's not the all-encompassing program. It's the thing that everybody wants to bring in because it's the missing piece. And when you do bring it in and you implement it, it creates an amazing and beautiful foundation for you to do work in all those other areas. If you just think about the fact that my body is settled and my mind is grounded and I feel calm, cool, collected. When you feel those sensations in your body and you're not constantly struggling with, I can't sleep and I'm so anxious and I'm feeling depression and I'm having all these mood swings, it makes the work of recovery so much harder in those other areas. But when you settle yourself in this way, you're so much more receptive and able to work on healing your relationships, to get yourself stabilized and be employable again, and all these other things that can be a part of somebody's recovery. You said biochemical mayhem. I've never heard you use that phrase before, but I was like, my brain was like firing on all cylinders when you said that, because I was like, what an incredible way to describe what you and I have experienced and what we know people who are struggling with substances are experiencing, whether they're just addicted to sugar, they're addicted to meth, they're addicted to alcohol, they're addicted to gambling, even if it's just a process addiction. there is a huge biochemical piece to that, and it really is biochemical mayhem. And so balancing your neurotransmitters with nutrition therapy and all the other things that we talk about, how to get good quality sleep, how to manage your stress levels, how to get sunshine on a daily basis, how to fulfill your primal needs that are a part of your DNA. We wake up every day with a set of needs. Some of them are the most basic needs in the world. We need to drink water and that sort of thing. But because of this modern life that we're living in, we've overlooked so much of that because we're so darn busy. We're busy. We're trying to figure out where to get the best information from. Maybe we're not getting the best information. But when you really start learning what are my needs, what are not just my primal needs, but my own unique needs as a unique human being who has gifts and skills and things to share with the world, what are my needs? How do I start learning how to recognize them and acknowledge them and then take action to fulfill them? It is nobody else's responsibility to fulfill my needs. That lands with me. That's a big part of recovery, is learning to do that. I need to know my own needs and I need to learn how to get them filled. And so we'll talk about that so much. And I
can just repeat something real quick, because it might help our listeners to hear it out of two different mouths.
Yeah.
Everything that you just said, like, I really just want to drive home the point that nutrition, I can speak 100% through experience, is the most powerful driver for emotional stability, which we all need in order to do the work of recovery. Like, recovery is so hard, no matter what it is you're recovering from, but it's so much harder when you are all over the place. When you have a solid foundation, and some level of consistency in one area, if it's nutrition, you are set up for such greater success.
Mm-hmm. I'm so glad that you pointed that out, because sometimes I will go back and listen to things that we've talked about and I'll think like, oh, I didn't really drive home that point. I hope people got it. But yes, that is what this is all about. That is what this is all about. We want to be able to provide that one thing that I think that most people are missing, and be able to share the stories too of the people that have used, not just me and you, the hundreds, the thousands, however many people I can get on this podcast that have had success in this area, to be able to share their personal stories with us. And so thank you for that. And the other thing is that I truly believe that healing comes through community. And not everybody's a big fan of doing group work, but I really and truly feel like it is a huge component when you have all these people coming together from different backgrounds and from different pathways, actually, where we can be unified in this one area. And it doesn't mean we're eating the same exact way. It just means that we are recognizing that this is an area we need help with, or it's an area we have interested in, or we want to start putting those practical steps in place. And when people do that together and they support each other and they talk about the obstacles they're coming up against, and we have this wonderful, group and community of people that are all walking through very similar experiences together, there is a tremendous amount of healing that can come through that, as well as joy. Building joy in recovery, I believe, is huge. And we build joy through relationships. And so that is also why we are offering our group program, Recovery U, which I mentioned earlier, is going to be highly accessible through an app on your phone, through your laptop. We'll have live virtual group coaching sessions all throughout the week for many different topics. If you decide to join the group, you'll have instant access to the 7-part core course of what is the PAWS protocol, Post-Acute Withdrawal Syndrome, and how do you implement it. And the PAWS protocol is a dietary framework, that framework I mentioned in the very beginning, that literally anybody, regardless of the way that you eat, can start implementing to improve your nutrition specific to recovery and mood balance and reducing or eliminating cravings. I've experienced this. Nikki, you've experienced this. Nikki was actually one of the first people. She was in the group of the very first virtual groups that I ever offered. It was like 4 years ago, something like that. So at that point I had been doing in-person groups, but it was the first time I was like, let's try this virtually. And we had a small group and it was amazing. And so we've just over the last 5 years, like really hammered down what do people need to know? What pieces are they missing? How do you help people to implement these changes? Because you really need to have a really good understanding. And I believe that Nikki and I have this, of what it takes to help people implement change. What is the science behind behavior change? It's not just, oh, we're the holders of this knowledge, and now we're just going to pass this knowledge on to you. Many, many people will tell you, I kind of know what to do, but I don't do it. Or I kind of know what to do, but I don't know how to get there, or I don't know where to start. And that's what Recovery U is about. It's going to be a beautiful community of people from all paths of life that fall on all, portions of the spectrum of recovery, early recovery, late-term recovery, different things that they struggle with. And we're going to do it together. And we're going to be able to provide a massive amount of resources for a very small monthly fee. And I cannot be more excited about this. And so I hope that you will consider looking into Recovery U and joining us, so that you can be like, hey, I listened to the podcast and I'm here to do the work, because that's what it's all about. And we're here to help you to do the work so that you can become what we have become, which is the integration of who we really are. We know who our true selves are. We are able to show up in the world every day as our authentic selves. And that tension of, I'm not doing what I want to do, I'm not doing what I think I'm supposed to do, it's gone. And when that tension is removed, you are able to just climb up this like hierarchy of self-actualization, and you have such greater impact on the world. I would have never been able to do a podcast like this years ago, because I was still crawling my way out of this pit. And now that we're here, like we've arrived, like you said, and we understand what it takes. And we have that love and passion for helping other people that have walked those similar paths. I just cannot wait to help introduce people to what it feels like to feel good in your own skin, and to be able to really achieve the life that you want and go after your dreams and all of those things, because you've taken care of all this other stuff that holds you back. Right.
Add something.
Yes.
Just you kind of bringing up that word arrived again, what made me want to add this in. And I may say this in a future episode, I can't remember, but we do feel like we've arrived to a certain degree.
Right.
And there's always, we're on a path, we're continuing to go. And it just reminds me of this statement, that my best friend said to me a number of years ago. She was actually dedicating a song to me on the radio during Mental Health Awareness Week in Seattle, on one of the radio stations, and addiction, something like that. And she said, addiction is not a doorway you walk through, it's a house that you maintain. And so I feel like we've walked through the door. We're in the home, we're in the building, and we've been in here, and we've been remodeling and for a while. Right. And things are looking pretty good for both of us. Mm-hmm. A lot of people, though, are just it's important to know that recovery is forever in a way, but beautiful. Mm-hmm. It's not something that you just get to and then you go back to your life how it was because now you're healthy and great. It's changing your entire lifestyle, the way you think, the way you live, and really allowing it to change. Honestly, if you just kind of get out of the way, you get guided once you start to do healthy things. Yeah. So I'm not sure if that's helpful, but I just wanted to.
That's extremely helpful. Thank you for bringing that up, because I would never want people to think that, like, when I say I've arrived, that I'm recovered. I never consider myself recovered. I consider myself living in recovery for the rest of my life. And that house you're talking about, where we're living and we're redecorating and doing construction and stuff like that, that's like my hobby now. Like, I sort of look at it as like, oh, we're going to remodel the bathroom. It's like something fun, as opposed to when you're in early recovery and you're like freaking out and super stressed and you're just gasping for air. This is now more of like, this is my life. I freaking love it. I'm constantly doing upgrades, and everything about my life is finding these little tweaks here and there that just make things better, make things easier, and continue to allow me to be the person that I want to be, but also to continue to keep developing that vision. Who I want to be next year will look totally different than who I want to be in 10 years. But every year that I add on to this house of recovery that I'm living in, it just keeps expanding and growing and become more and more beautiful every year. And so that is a wonderful point. We haven't arrived as if we're like these sages that have attained recovery. We are just enjoying the heck out of the journey, right? That's how I would say it. And so I think maybe you would probably agree with me there, right?
Well said, all of it.
Yeah. So we're gonna end it there. We have so much good, amazing stuff in store for upcoming episodes. I will share with you. I have one request. Please, as a listener or a watcher, be patient with us. We are on a learning curve. We have decided to take imperfect action. We are not professional podcasters. Maybe we will be one day, but every episode that comes out, I think we get a little bit better, right? The audio gets a little bit better. The visual gets a little bit better. We're slowly upgrading equipment. Every now and then there's a little robot voice or a little, something that comes off kind of strange, but what we want to say, a what?
Little dog bark.
A little dog bark. You'll get to meet Pickles eventually. Our friend Pickles. He is a part of this show. So yeah, just be patient with us and know that the farther along we get in the Addiction Nutritionist podcast, the better it's going to get. And one day we will have all of these pieces nailed for you, but we hope that you'll hang in there to get this information. You'll check out Recovery U, which there will be a link on the website, theaddictionnutritionist.com. That will always be the landing page for you to gain access to everything. And I hope to see you in Recovery U. And I hope that you'll, download future episodes and give us lots of glowing reviews, and that will maybe get to meet you if you're a listener face to face or virtually one day. So thank you so much.
Maybe
yes.
If you know somebody who this could be great for, share.
Absolutely. Please share with your friends in recovery, share with your friends who love somebody that is either struggling with addiction or is in recovery, which that means everybody, because we're all affected by this, right? So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. We will see you in episode 2. Thanks for being here, friends. Take care.